vehicle was involved, which lost control before leaving the road. Officials say a 27-year-old and 25-year-old, both living in Chatham, has died. Well, the trials of two key figures in the convoy protest are underway in Ottawa. The judge-only trial heard opening arguments from the Crown Attorney today.
Excuse us, everyone.
Tamara Leach from Alberta and Chris Barber from Saskatchewan have been charged with mischief, counseling others to commit mischief, intimidation, and obstructing police. They were the high-profile faces of the demonstration against the COVID-19 public health restrictions. The protest gridlocked the blocks around Parliament Hill for 3 weeks. In the winter of 2022, organizers raised millions of dollars for the movement. The two people accused of leading the Ambassador Bridge blockade are still making their way through the court system. Well, Premier Doug Ford says there's going to be a review of Greenbelt land swaps. It comes after two investigations found the process to allow development on lands that had been protected was flawed and rushed, and after the resignation yesterday of the Premier's housing minister. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has the story.
Premier Doug Ford announced a big task for his new housing minister, Paul Calandra, a Greenbelt review.
There's going to be a complete review from top to bottom, and then they're going to have to stand on their own merit. And it's not just the 14 lands.
14 refers to those lands that were removed from the Greenbelt. During a review, he says development can still go ahead on those sites, but the whole Greenbelt will now be looked at.
I believe the Premier today declared open season on the Greenbelt.
The new review didn't quiet down the outrage from opposition parties.
This is just going to be a colossal waste of our time and our money.
The NDP leader repeated the call to return the lands to the Greenbelt.
It's a complete sham. This is a sham. The Premier knows perfectly well what needs to happen here. These were dirty deals.
Recent investigations found most of the sites taken out of the Greenbelt were suggested by the housing minister's chief of staff. Almost all the sites owned by a few wealthy developers he connected with. The Auditor General finding it'll mean an extra $8.3 billion in property values. Today is the first time we've heard from the Premier since Housing Minister Steve Clark resigned yesterday, and since sources told media that the mysterious Mr. X in the Integrity Commissioner report, an alleged illegal lobbyist on a Greenbelt deal, was the former mayor of Clarington, John Mutton. In photos with the Premier and several of his ministers, the Premier brushed that off.
I just be a gentleman, and if they want to take a picture, they take a picture.
During Ford's 50-minute news conference, he tried to focus on his government's plan to build more homes, also blaming the former Liberal government that first created the Greenbelt.
Didn't consult with anyone when they took 2 million acres of privately owned property off people, and just moved forward with it with no consultation.
Except there was consultation, something the Auditor General noted in her report, including a task force and input from stakeholders. Ford also repeatedly miscounted the recommendations from the Auditor General.
Well, there was 14 recommendations, and I said we're going to follow those 14 recommendations.
Except there are 15. The one the government isn't following is to reevaluate its Greenbelt decision. As for that review and which lands could be removed, that'll be up to the new minister, the Premier says. Paul Calandra, known as an attack dog and strong communicator of the government's message.
And I think the appointment of Mr. Calandra is very clearly a move that's not about housing. It's about protect the king. Protect the king. The king's at risk. There's very little insulation there. Like when you look at it.
That's the CBC's Lorenda Redekop reporting. Well, you can't put a price on good pie, and over the weekend, a pharmacy in Harrow didn't. They spent more than $37,000 at the Harrow Fair's pie auction. Their biggest bid, a whopping $15,000 on a single key lime pie. It's a way for them to honor Lonnie Katie, co-owner of the pharmacy that passed away earlier this year. CBC's Jacob Barker stopped by today to get a taste of how the auction went.
15,000! And now 15,500.
We kind of of had a game plan before we got there, but that was blown out of the water when we got there, and the first pie was actually donated to Lonnie, and it was in commemoration of him. We didn't know that was going to happen, so we blew our budget, we'll say, on the first pie, and everything just kind of spiraled after. So Lonnie was a huge, huge supporter of the community and different corporations that were set up and different things around the community. He always supported. He wasn't able to participate this year because he passed on back in March, so it was kind of our way of kind of showing his support. We didn't want to have like the McGivney Center or other businesses feel like a loss because he wasn't around. We wanted to kind of continue his support for the community and the function. If you ever met him, he was a phenomenal guy, biggest heart that you would ever meet in your life. And we just kind of wanted to bring that across as well. So a couple days before the auction, we actually put together a little ad in the paper, the Harrow News, our local paper, and kind of invited everyone to bid against us at the fair. So we had a huge, tremendous turnout and lots of bidding, lots of sparring between individuals. And yeah, we got a huge amount of pies, and we got the first place winning pie, key lime pie, and we paid $15,000 for this one, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna try this.
There
okay.
you go.
All right, here we go. This is an expensive piece of pie.
Yep.
An expensive bite of pie. Okay.
Better than sex.
I think it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, the charity auction ended up raising $82,000 for the John McGivney Children's Center, which is a record-setting number for the event. Although the first day back to school can feel like the end of the summer, the weather is indicating the opposite. We have your first week back to school weather forecast coming up after the break. 69 years ago, almost to the day, we started broadcasting out of this building here on Riverside Drive and Crawford Avenue. The station first signed on the air as CKLW-TV, or Channel 9, which was the first television station in Windsor. And in 1975, it became CBC owned and operated. Well, for nearly 70 years, the region's top stories have been told, and lots of them still saved in our archives. And we would love to show you some. So starting this week, CBC Windsor will be airing stories that mattered to residents of the region decades ago. We're calling it Rose City Rewind. Well, tonight's Rewind is a story we aired on September 4th of 1982. Just as many of you might have been doing last week, or maybe even this weekend, students were doing some last-minute back-to-school shopping. Have a look.
If the recession still has as firm a grip on Windsor as it did a year ago, it has not been evident, at least not here at the Devonshire Mall, and at least not this weekend. There's at least one explanation for a brisk retail business in back-to-school clothing. It comes from a spokesman for Devonshire Mall. Jones says people are working in Windsor, and they're going to buy something. They won't pay the 20% interest rates to buy big-ticket items such as cars and stoves. So they're buying what they can with their immediately disposable income. One woman interviewed, a mother of 5, said she's spending more this year because prices are higher. There is also more cash changing hands, reflecting the growing reluctance to use credit cards with their interest charges of well above 20%. If business is good now for some merchants, it'll be even better for others a few days after school starts. The manager of this young women's fashion store said many of her customers wait to see what the other kids at school are wearing before they come in to buy.
Colin, I don't know if you saw in that archival piece, but it looks like you get a nice pair of Nike shoes for your first day of school for about $17.
I know. It's hard to find that kind of a bargain now. You know, it's interesting because I'm old enough to remember those days and how tough those times were on families, but I bet you, Meg, I still have some Nikes from then in my closet.
Well, they'd be expensive now, Colin, wouldn't they? The vintage Nikes.
Yeah, they just might be. All right, it is back to school, but it's sort of hard to feel that, right? With the heat, with this extreme heat that we're dealing with, we would have maybe liked to have seen some of this in August, but we can't control that. That temperature pattern, though, we've got another day where we're going to be seeing those temperatures around 30, humidex values around 40, but then into Thursday, you see the color contours here on my temperature map starting to change, going more into the mid-oranges and yellows. So the temperatures are still mild, still warm, but they're beginning to come down into Friday, and then it's more noticeable, that change, as we head, of course, right, in time for the weekend. But what do those current temperatures look like? Well, still have 30s on the board for Sarnia, for Windsor as well, and then you have to go to the feels like temperature. So we do have a humidex value holding at 40, and when we get above that, and there have been times where we're just nosing into that 40 to 45, that's when we know not only is it great discomfort we can feel, but you really have to avoid exertion. It can be a health risk, and it's because of that that the heat warnings get issued by Environment Canada. So always we mention about staying hydrated, but I always like to remind folks you have to do it before you get to the point of feeling thirsty. So you just, even if you're not really thinking it, just kind of keep that water going throughout the day. The cool showers, loose clothing, staying in the shade, and of course don't leave anyone, and certainly not your pets either, in the car when we have conditions like this. Look at Northern Ontario. Look at the contrast in temperatures. They're almost a 15-degree difference here between Kenora and Thunder Bay. And Moosonee, the hot spot in Ontario today, only 32 now. I say only because it was over 34 degrees there a little bit earlier this afternoon. So that extreme heat to the north as well, but as this next front comes through, that's going to be changing everything as it goes west to east. A few storms, I mean lighter stuff that's bubbled up into Michigan into the afternoon. afternoon or evening hours here, could we have a few of those isolated cells make their way across the border, kind of the remnants of? So that risk here into our evening hours, then a greater chance ahead of the cold front into tomorrow of seeing some afternoon thunderstorm activity coming through. Some of these could be on the stronger side just because of all that humidity there to work with. So very buoyant conditions. Thursday as well, unsettled, even though we're going to be seeing things changing and getting those temperatures gradually coming on down for us. So you can see that real principal change as we move towards the end of the week.
Well, thanks so much for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
Well, if you're a Rolling Stones fan, you're going to want to stay tuned for a story we have coming up after the break. As the war in Ukraine drags on, there's word Russia is looking for new supplies of weapons, and it may be turning to North Korea. CBC's Abby Kolothason has more.
The Kremlin says there is nothing to say about reports that Russian President Vladimir Putin will welcome North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. U.S. media suggests Kim may take an armored train to Vladivostok this month in what would be his first foreign visit in more than 4 years.
Without Ukraine war, Russia would not care about North Korea, probably would follow the UN Security Council resolutions.
Both countries have denied that Pyongyang has provided Moscow with shells and missiles for its war on Ukraine. But analysts say Putin is turning to rogue states for weapons.
Would you go to North Korea for a reliable, accurate, up-to-date, modern supply of weapons? No. But Russia does not have any options left.
North Korea is cash-strapped. The economic picture has only worsened due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Kim is looking to improve the quality of his country's weapons, and Moscow may be able to help.
Kim also gets expertise. He gets an exchange of information. He gets an exchange of technology.
While Howell doesn't believe unconfirmed reports of possible naval exercises with China, he says these three nations are eyeing a common foe.
Now is a very ripe time, particularly for North Korea and for China and Russia, to show their common opposition to the United States, and particularly the United States alliances in Northeast Asia.
Howell says a face-to-face meeting between Putin and Kim upgrades ties, but it also underlines North Korea's foreign policy outlook is about getting what it wants when it wants it. Abby Kualdasin, CBC News, London.
The Rolling Stones are getting set to release their first studio album in 18 years. It's called Hackney Diamonds. Details will come tomorrow in a YouTube live stream from London. It will feature an interview with Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Ronnie Wood by late-night talk show host Jimmy Fallon. The new release comes out 55 years after their massive hit Jumpin' Jack Flash topped the charts. The Stones' last studio album, A Bigger Bang, was released in 2005. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also download the CBC News app for stories that matter most to you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.